In today's episode, I want to talk about investing for kids, and I'm going to share exactly what we do for our daughters, but I don't want to share just that. I want to talk about the intangibles because I think the intangibles aren't talked about enough, and I want to go on record saying I want to create as many trust fund babies as I possibly can. So every one of my kids will be a trust fund baby, and a lot of people will say that's a spoiled way, and you're creating a spoiled kid, and it's going to create all sorts of disaster down the road. That is if you don't parent. And I also want to go on the record as saying most middle class takes are exactly that. So I'm going to go against the grain and go against the middle class here, and I'm going to teach you how to be wealthy. I'm going to teach you how to be in the upper class. And most of my wealthy friends and wealthy families that I deal with are all investing for their children at a high rate because they're keeping money, which equals power whether you like it or not in today's society, to make better decisions to help the world in a better way down the road. The more money you have, the more powerful you become, and the more decision-making power, and the more you can push your own agenda or help people in a good way. And as long as you're good intentioned, which our family is very much so, we are going to take that money and help the world in a better way. One of our biggest initiatives right now is to help my daughter with Dravet syndrome, but not only her, but everybody that deals and battles with Dravet syndrome on a daily basis. And so we are making the push to raise $1 million for Dravet syndrome, and that's on my website, budgetdog.com. You can always contribute to that if you would like. On behalf of Budget Dog LLC, we're going to raise $1 million one way or the other, and my goal is to continue to raise and earn money to help the world in a better way, and that's one of our ways. And so I think a lot of times middle-class mindsets, think that you have to make your kids struggle, and I don't think that's right at all. And I think it's a really lazy take, in fact. And I'm going to absolutely destroy this argument today, by the way. So get ready for a good show because this is what we do. And I'm feeling a little spicy today. So there's not a day that goes by that I talk about investing for my kids online and some idiot out of nowhere says, well, your kids are going to be spoiled. And I hear all sorts of things, especially with having daughters, as to what they're going to turn into at 18 years old. And I always laugh. I don't really say anything back. I'm like, yeah, this is another one of those people on the internet, the general public per se. And the reality is what they're missing is everything. They're only focused on linking having money to being spoiled. And that is so far from the truth in every single way. Let's logically think about, why would having money equal being spoiled? Think about it for a second. Why? There is no connection. The reason there is a lot of that happening with kids that get money versus, what happens with them, the reason you hear those stories is because there was no parenting in between. There was no bridge. There was no telling the kid what to do, with the expectation what to do, the culture in the household, the values. Maybe it was just a very wealthy family that never really was involved in their child's life, and they never really taught them the importance of the values and the culture and the expectation that we always talk about. And maybe the kid got that money and they were off on their own, and, mom and dad were at work, busy working, and that kid took that money and blew it. And then you hear the story of that trust fund kid. But the reality is you don't have to be like that. You don't have to do it that way. And there's no link between money and kid. There's lots of links between money and immaturity making a really, really bad outcome, or money and lack of parenting and having a bad outcome. 100%. That happens all the time. But why would money instantly equal spoiled kid? There's an in-between aspect of this that most of the middle class are totally missing. I have my theories on this. I think number one is that individual, that parent, feels like they can't get ahead, so therefore they don't want to put their kid ahead, and it makes them feel better inside. That's tough to hear for a lot of people, but it's also the truth, and I don't lie. So a lot of times people are just saying that, well, my kid's not going to get this because I didn't get that money growing up, and it's going to turn them into a trust fund kid or whatever the case is. And the reality is they just aren't educated enough to empower themselves to be financially free, so therefore they just instantly point fingers as to why that's a bad move. That happens too frequent. And oftentimes if you just educate yourself and you go through Budget Dog Academy, all my students, you'll realize that you don't have to feel that way. You don't have to feel bitter towards helping your children. I think most of you that are listening are good parents probably, and at least have good intentions for your children. You send them to good schools, you send them to sports, you send them to their friend's house, and everything you do is hopefully at least good intention. And there's no difference with helping them with money and getting them ahead, because money equals power. And the more money you have, the more powerful you are, the more you can help people. And the whole initiative with Dravet syndrome of what we're trying to accomplish ourselves is specifically that. We are working to give $1 million to Dravet syndrome, and we want to make sure we empower our daughters. As of now, we have 2 daughters, to be able to further that goal, to help more people, to take all of the income that we earn and all the money that we have and change the world for a better place. And if they didn't have that money, it's not that they couldn't make an impact from, a physical labor standpoint, or like, voicing their opinion or getting out there on a platform and talking about stuff. They can absolutely do it that way. But money moves society, whether we like it or not. And if they have more money, they can have more power in that decision-making process, and they can literally change the world in a better way. And I think that's where people are missing the conversation here, is that if we fix this in between, which we'll get to in a second, we can make such a big impact. And if we make that big impact, we can live the lifestyle we want to live, not only ourselves, but also for other people, and help a lot of people in a good way. And I think if you adjust that mindset to thinking middle class versus the wealthy elite and the upper class, your whole family is going to change. You're going to be that change in your family that decided to be the first millionaire in their family. Of my family, I mean, it's not very well talked about, but I would assume I'm the first millionaire in my family. And that goes to say that I decided for the change. We grew up middle class. We had a lot of middle class, normal type of growing up in America happening. And there was nothing wrong with any of that. But what I wanted to do is change the wealth trajectory of my family. And I can pretty confidently say I'm the first millionaire in my family. I mean, that's how little we talk about money in my family. We never did. It wasn't even a thing. But I know, just based on some assumptions, I would assume I'm the first millionaire. And I would fall into the 80% of the first generation millionaires or most millionaires are first generation millionaires. And 80% of those is typically what you see, but then you see the people pointing the fingers, all these rich people got rich because of inheritances and all that kind of stuff. And the 20%, there's only like 2 out of 10 people that actually get wealthy from a parent. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not even a bad thing. That's what my daughters will eventually be. They'll be in that the minority percentage of receiving the wealth, receiving the inheritance, and passing it down for generations. And there's nothing wrong with that either. But at some point, you got to be the catalyst to this wealth building journey for your family and decide the change. And that's what we decided to do, my wife and I. So with that being said, there's a lot behind the numbers that play a significant role here. And I think there's a few things that are really important to note here. Number one, anything counts. Time is your biggest wealth building factor. If you simply put $100 a month away, and if that's too much, do less. Don't get focused on the numbers. Focus on the principle here. You put $100 away at 10% returns for 18 years, you will have over $50,000 for your child at 18. Yes, that's factoring inflation of 3%. Yes, if inflation does creep up on us, so will the 10% return we always talk about, built into it. So the crazy thing about that is that just a small $100 a month can really change your kid's life in a massive way. I mean, I grew up I got $0 for when I was 18 years old or when I left the house, right? So if somebody gave me $50,000, what I could do with that to fast track where we're even at today would have been amazing. And there's no slight to my parents by any means here. That wasn't the intention. But my point is, if you can change your kid's life with giving them $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, whatever the case is, to start their journey, it's going to speed them up so much more to accomplish so much more stuff. Not to mention, if you build financial freedom within your family, maybe your kid doesn't have to go through the typical traditional schooling system to go get a job 9 to 5 that they hate, and they can actually focus on real work to make a meaningful impact on this world. Ever thought about that, middle class? Probably not. So there's so many different ways that you can really, really help transcend your and really just take them to a new level. But I think the other piece of this, not only anything counts, and time is the biggest wealth building factor, but mastering the habits. I think this is another reason, parents don't think they say this excuse is like, well, I'm not going to help my kid because I didn't get help or whatever the case is. I think they're just in a bad spot. And I think if they knew the power of education with financial literacy, I think they would open their mind. All my students that come into Budget Law Academy, they at one point did not feel great about their money, and now they do. And that's over 1,400 people in my academy at this point in time. There's a reason I'm so confident when I say this, because I see that transition all the time. I see this transformation a lot. And when they master the habit, what they don't realize is that initially when they master the habit, it doesn't sound fun. It's like, well, I wish I just had more money. But if you master the habit, you master and build a system, when you get that money, you make better use of it. And not to mention, when you first build that system, you become so habitual in what you do with your finances that as money comes in, and even like your regular money right now, your regular income, you start to find and utilize it in a more efficient way. You find more money in your own situation when you build a system and you master the habit. So then when you get the raise, you don't have to freak out and be like, well, this is the solution. I made more money. You already know your baseline because you've set your standard, you've set your system, you built your system. You can take that extra money and now do way more with it. You can speed up your financial journey. You can give more to your kids. You can help the world in a better, more efficient way, whatever you want to do. But now you have the money to do that, and you know exactly where you lie because you've built a system. And this is what every one of my academy students do, is just build a simple system that works for them. It's automated. It's easy to understand. It's layman's terms. Anybody can do it. And a lot of these middle-class individuals, that middle-class mindset, they don't have this, and they're lacking that. And therefore, they're lacking, so they're lashing out. It happens all the time. My wife and I have talked about this a lot as well, is that, how are we actually going to impact our children outside of just giving them a dollar amount? I'll get into the dollar amount in just a second, guys, so I'll tell you exactly what we're doing for our daughters. But in general, we are talking about other things, the intangibles behind how we're going to make our kids not quote-unquote trust fund babies in the sense that you think of trust fund baby, but respectable kids that do a lot and give back in a big way, right? Number one is values that you teach your kids. I think it's super important to be actively involved, and this goes for general parenting and, across the board, but what to spend your money on. As a kid, you monkey see, monkey do. You see your kid get an Xbox, you want an Xbox. What are you actually spending money on? And what does that actually mean to you? And what is the value of the dollar that you're, handing over to get whatever thing you want, okay? Not chasing material stuff is huge in our book. Like, we have a decent house, an average house, average car. We could afford a lot more, but we just don't care for material stuff. And we could go get new clothes all the time. Just doesn't do a whole lot for us, right? And so I think it's really important to have your values correct and values aligned with fancy stuff does not equal better, happier, anything like that. It's just chasing kind of an endless dream. And Will Smith, I posted this the other day, had a video saying, like, I've been at the rooftop. I've seen the very top of the top of affording anything. And every single time, it's just, it's pointless. It has an end to it. And what doesn't have an end to it are the things that actually matter in life, right? And so I think it's really important to understand not only what to spend money on, but not chasing that material stuff and what's important for them. What do they want to get out of life? What's their purpose? And aligning their spend with what their goals are, what their values are, what their mission is in life, whatever the case is, and aligning that spend with that and teaching them how to give money. I think one of the big things with the Dravet syndrome goal donation, obviously our daughters are 2.5 and 9 months right now. They're pretty young. They don't understand this quite fully yet, but they're starting to pick up on it. At least the 2.5-year-old is that everything they see us do, they hear us do, they are picking up. Like, side story, my daughter, like, I think I say stuff throughout the day. I'm walking around the house talking to my wife, and like, I don't realize Logan's listening to this. She's 2.5. She's really young. She doesn't really fully even talk at this point in time. But the other day, I dropped the word shit on accident, right? And she overheard it. And I didn't realize she overheard it at that point in time. The following day, she was being goofy, saying some stuff, and she looked at me, she said, shit. And like, that like woke me up. Like, they see and hear everything we do. And obviously, I tried not to laugh, but it was pretty funny. But they see and hear everything we do. And so as she gets older and she starts to become more active with us and stuff, we're going to talk to her about what we're using our money for, but also why we're using that money. Like the Dravet goal, not spending money on a new house because her friend got a new house or a new car. Like, we don't always need that stuff. That conversation within a household to teach the values is going to be extra important, especially when your kid sees and feels and hears everything you do in a given day. It's setting the culture that, like I said, they literally see mom and dad do everything in the house. And so how we act, how we talk, what we do, all that kind of stuff plays a significant role in a developing child. So taking them down the right path, even when we don't necessarily know they're looking, but also lead a life of, from our angle, a good quality life of helping a lot of people. Them just seeing that and seeing what we're involved in and the conversation we have and the organizations we hang out with and the people we hang out with, whatever the case is, they're going to see that and they're going to understand that. And eventually, it might not click at 5 years old, but they're going to eventually adopt that type of philosophy with time. And I think it's really, really important down the line. The other thing is expectations. Setting expectations with your kids, they're not going to know the amount that we've saved for them. I think that's really, I don't think that's really relevant. Because if you're waiting for like a specific dollar amount, like I get 100,000 at the age of 18, I think that becomes a greedy thing. I think it becomes kind of a selfish thing for the child and themselves. They start to hear and think about that. Oh, sweet, I get X number of dollars at this age. I can start to plan what I'm going to do with this. The reality is, if you talk to them about the principle of saving money, educating financially, and being able to give money, they're just going to know, hey, mom and dad are saving, that's what you should do. And they're going to understand the principle versus the people online. They're like, well, this dollar amount is too much for me. It's like you missed the principle like entirely. But they're going to understand like what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to do it and the meaning behind all this. Like, hey, we're able to give $1 million to Dravet syndrome. That's an awesome goal. Oh, how are you able to do that? And they're going to start to link. Kids are smart, right? They'll ask questions. They'll say, well, why? Well, how? Well, all these questions, right? And so those types of things are going to start to play out as they get older, start to ask questions. They see us doing this live real time. And that's a huge, huge expectation setter for that child without them even really knowing. It's not you reprimanding them, not you telling them exactly what to do. It's teaching them through expectation because of what you're doing and what you're involving them with. And that's a really important concept. Not to mention, if you're well, we can kind of translate to the number side of things. So culture, expectation, values, all that kind of stuff is really, really important. Having the right mindset around delivering money and gifting money to your child. But a trust from a technical aspect could be a great vehicle. Using a trust, which we do as well, to put stipulations to dictate amounts given, right? You can give X amount at this age, if they do X, Y, and Z, if they get A, B's, and C's, whatever you want to set in your trust, get with a trust attorney and set the stipulations for this. It's a phenomenal thing to do. And a lot of parents don't do this, and they realize that if you do this, like, you can kind of set the stage and you can kind of like keep the money in your name in case if they don't do something right or whatever stipulations you want to set. Now, something we did as well is thought about the investment accounts we're going to use. So I'm going to break down the investment accounts I have for my daughters also, and then I'm also going to explain why we used each one of these, because it's going to wrap back into the whole point of this episode, okay? So number one is for my first daughter. We are doing just $500 for Logan in a parent brokerage account. Now, we initially started off with what we're doing for my second daughter, which is $250. We're splitting that 500 in half. So $250 in a parent brokerage account. We'll get into that in a second. And also another $250 into the $529. $529 obviously is for college, as most of you guys know. So when we first started thinking about this, we were like, okay, well, let's get a Vanguard college cost calculator out. Let's figure out what we need for college starting at the age of 0, brand new. We opened accounts like 6 months into their pregnancy. So my wife's pregnancy. So they had accounts before they were born. So we opened a 529, figure out what we needed to fund using Vanguard's college cost calculator to fund college in 18 years, 60% of that was our goal. Our goal was to make sure that, hey, that other 40%, you're going to have to get scholarship, you're going to have to work, you're going to have to do all these sorts of things to get that, to make up for that difference, because we want you to have skin in the game as well. We love to gift, but we also aren't going to just teach you to take. You're going to give as well, and it's going to be a give-take relationship, but we're also going to speed your process up as a result. You're not going to have student loans, all that kind of stuff. Now, the other remainder of that, we budgeted $500 for each child. The other remainder went to a parent brokerage account. The parent brokerage account is in my wife's name. This is not my child's account. It's earmarked, like we have it geared to give it to them at a certain point in time, but this is our money. And so when I invest for my kids, quote unquote, I'm really investing in my account. So it's only theirs if I decide to give it. We don't need a trust for this. We decide if we want to give this to them in the future. So the $250 for the brokerage account, parent brokerage account, not a custodial account, not an UTMA, that's an entirely different vehicle. A brokerage account, I call it parent brokerage account because it's in your name, is $250 and $250 for my second daughter. Now, my first daughter, as you guys know, we're raising money for Dravet syndrome. What is Dravet syndrome? most of you guys know this by now, obviously it's a form of epilepsy, right? My first daughter has that. And so with that being said, there's a lot of Dravet syndrome, not just seizures. There's potential development delays, things of that nature. So I don't know what college is going to look like for her at this point in time. So at this point, we started with that process. Then as things developed and things played out, we don't know what's going to happen. And so it's not to say I don't go back to the 529 with time, but for right now at this age, it's 2 to 6 years old. It's such a pivotal time for development, and we don't necessarily know what that looks like. And so until I really get a good idea, is this potential, is this going to be doable for sure, I'm going to put this in a brokerage account. We can always wrap back around and put money in a 529. She also already has $12,000 to $14,000, I think it is, right now as we speak, in a 529. So it's not like she doesn't have any money there. She's doing okay there. So for my first daughter, we obviously have a $500 deposit into a brokerage account, which is all of our money. The second daughter, we put $250 into a brokerage account, which is our money, and the other $250 into a 529. So therefore, if you look at our investments across the board, we have $1,000. $750 of that's going to our accounts that we're going to gift to her later, gift to both of them later. And the other $250 is in a 529, which is geared for specifically education, but it's also custodial 529 to where she's a beneficiary, and therefore I have the ability to change this at any point in time. So I have control on that as well. So even with those accounts, we also have a trust, right? On top of that, I talked to you about dictating, what they get when, but depending on what happens, stuff like that. On top of that, they're both baby models for the Budget Dog brand. Now, this is a pretty rare situation to be in. They don't make a ton of money. The IRS is not coming after me. This is perfectly legal. I think Ellie's made $150 total, 3 hours at $50 a piece for a photo shoot. We're not talking the $14,600 single standard deduction in 2024 that people are promoting on TikTok. This is not anything like that. But they have I think Logan's made she at least has in her account about $1,000 into a Roth IRA from 2.5 years. That was active income, that was gains, that was earnings, all that kind of stuff. Ellie's a lot smaller, 9 months. She has a very small amount in there, but still, nonetheless, they are already building Roth IRA active investments for the retirement at the age of basically 0 or 1 or 2. And so if you do have kids, or you do have, a business, a side business or whatever, and they're participating and they do make actual income that they file tax on, a Roth IRA is a phenomenal vehicle to use. I highly recommend it because that's tax-free money. That money's, it's already been taxed. It goes into this vehicle. It grows tax-free forever, and they take it out and they don't have any taxes on it. That gives them such a supreme advantage, but it's also for retirement. So it's earned income as well. So you can't take away from if a drug addict goes to McDonald's and works, they go to McDonald's and work and they earn income, and whether they spend it on whatever, they're adults at that point in time. So you got to trust your kids to a certain extent. If that money's in a Roth IRA, you would hope they don't withdraw that before 65. You would think that you would, 59 and a half, that is. You would think that the education, the values, the culture, they would understand that concept. But there is a little bit of risk there. But again, it's earned income theoretically. So it's not like it's just money we're giving them at the end of the day. So that's what we do for our daughters. And I think that's a really, really big piece of the puzzle for seeing real success when it comes to it. So I think the biggest thing is when you're investing for your kids, set the stage for how they perceive money, how they feel around money. Are you constantly stressed around money? Does it make them stressed around money? Does it give them bad, vibe around money? Does it give them a negative cognition around money? Well, mom and dad never had it, so I was always struggling. So don't put your kid in that position. And if you guys want to figure out, the college cost calculator, remember, I'm going to put that in the show notes below. But the biggest thing behind this whole thing is to understand the link between money and spoiled. There's no such thing. It's the lack of what's in the middle that we just talked about that's missing. And so if you're of the middle class mindset that this equals spoiled, money equals spoiled, you're not thinking about the right way. And we need to reframe this conversation. And that's what this whole entire podcast episode today was about, because I want to reframe people's mind. Because if you want your family to do really, really well, and you want to be the change of your family, you need to start this process. You need to get your kids invested, and you will be a huge winner down the road when that money gets transferred to the next heirs and the next heirs and the next heirs. And meaningful stuff in this world happen as a result because you decided to be that person. You have an opportunity. I teach about this all the time in Budget Dog Academy. I have tons of YouTube content. I have tons of Instagram content, Twitter content on this stuff. It's on you to make this happen. You're an adult at the end of the day, right? If you want to stay in the middle class mindset, I'm not going to stop you. But all I'm going to say is we need to reframe this conversation and think about this differently, because it's going to open so many people, so many doors for so many people in their personal life. And I hope you take this, to heart, and I hope you guys make some significant change. And I will see you guys next week.
You've been listening to Money on My Mind with your host, Brendan Schlagbaum. If you found value in today's discussion, share it with someone who could benefit from it too. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, so you never miss a money mastery tip. Until next time, stay passionate about your financial journey and keep taking bold steps towards your money goals.